Hello and welcome to Humans of Reliability. Today I am joined by my friend Ricardo, who I've had the pleasure of meeting in real life in London last year. And I'm super excited to chat with today. So, Ricardo, I'll just toss it over to you to introduce yourself and what you do.
Hi, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Ricardo. I'm based in Porto, Portugal. I work for FanDuel in the Blip office in Portugal. I'm a principal engineer for the SRE area within FanDuel Sportsbook.
Perfect. And we can just jump right into it because I have lots of questions for you today. But something you mentioned, obviously, right off the bat, is that you are a principal SRE, which is a really cool role and not something that exists everywhere. And I'd love to hear a little bit about like your career path into SRE at the principal level and if that was always a goal for you or, how that came to be.
Yeah, sure. So I started my career in tech as a software engineer, right? No, not directly into the operations world. And over time, and due to a little bit of necessity in some of the companies that I worked at, the role of just automating stuff, infrastructure was more and more demand. And I gradually migrated into more an operational role. My titles over the years have been DevOps engineer, cloud engineer, and then eventually I started to focus a little bit on reliability and what that meant. And then I started to do more SRE roles. Then I started to progress in terms of senior SRE, lead SRE, and eventually at FanDuel and Blip, there was a necessity, especially for Sportsbook, which is one of the main verticals inside FanDuel, to actually own reliability. So I joined the company with the role of what does it even mean when we talk about reliability? So when someone says, "Oh, I want my API or my website to be reliable," what does that mean? So a lot of my work has been on that definition, and then all the technology underneath the covers that make it possible for that to happen. And we are growing an SRE practice within Sportsbook SRE and SRE in general inside FanDuel.
Yeah, and you put out a lot of really good content externally as well, which I think a lot of people appreciate. I've definitely seen lots of folks I know engaging with the stuff you put out there. And I was actually refreshing myself on some of the content that you have around SRE anti-patterns, which I think is a really great way to frame a lot of these things that we see. And I was wondering, like, for people who are maybe not in a direct position of leadership, maybe more junior, mid-level SREs who are noticing these types of anti-patterns popping up in their org, do you have any advice on like a first step they could take to try to influence that SRE culture without necessarily being like in charge of it?
I do think that SRE is not an exception in terms of finding any patterns, right? So we've seen this with Agile, we've seen this with DevOps, CI/CD. So I think it's about trying to understand like where are we going wrong, right? And I preempt that with what are we trying to achieve? Because a lot of the crap that companies fall into is that there's the new fad, right? The SRE is the new thing. Now it's platform engineering. Now it's DevOps. Now it's Agile. And people go, okay, what is the tool that I need to adopt? What is the thing that I need to do? No, it's not about that. It's trying to understand what's the problem. What are we trying to fix? Maybe CI/CD is not for me. Maybe that's not a problem that I have in my organization. So maybe at this point in my organization, reliability is not my prime concern. Maybe I'm focusing on building an MVP, trying to find my product market fit. It's trying to understand what are the problems that we are trying to fix. And starting with that basis, like from first principles, it's okay. What does SRE as a whole has that can help me on this journey? And that there's a lot. So there's a lot of documentation. If you read the SRE books, your head starts spinning. If you're the first time reading, because there's so much stuff there. It's like, oh, I didn't even know what to read. But I always start with that, like, what problems are we trying to fix? Or what problems are we trying to address? And is the SRE or other practice that the SRE advocates the one that will help me achieve my goals?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to frame it. Like not just cargo culting, whatever thing you're hearing is the best practice or the right way.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
like, where are we hurting right now? What's actively harming us? And how do we maybe pull from these ideas to find a fix? I think like people have been talking a lot about that sort of thing when it comes to, you mentioned the Google book too. It's a great book, but the intention was never like read this and then implement it exactly as Google does it. Because like no one else is Google. You don't need that.
Yeah, and to continue on this trend of the anti-patterns, two of probably the biggest ones that I see some companies, and I've fallen trap of them myself, is like one is the just rebranding whatever your operations teams is, right? So you have something that it's your operations is whatever they are called, and now they are labeled SRE. done, it's done. Or maybe you adopt a new tool or something like that, and you're SRE. Now, it doesn't work like that. And probably the other one is the one that you just mentioned, like that cargo code. So because Google does it this way, we need to do it this way. And Google is Google, right? It's so big, it has unique problems, unique challenges. You also have them as well. So does it even make sense to actually just lift and shift what Google does? Probably not, right? So it's good that you can learn from what Google does and other companies, but it shouldn't be like, because Google does this, we need to do it as well.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we see a lot in SRE, just because it is like, in the grand scheme of things, it's not new, but like a newer craft or a newer way to describe the work. So you see a lot more of that, just like adoption of a tactic that worked elsewhere, which like any discipline, you can't do that. Just like you need to approach all sorts of things differently depending on your scale and your audience and everything. SRE is just another one of those. I was actually also talking to Nathan Harvey, who leads the Dora team at Google, about a lot of these semantics and like the rebrand where DevOps becomes platform eng, becomes this, becomes that, and the extent to which it's useful versus not that useful. I think it's mainly like useful for the people doing the work to identify themselves in the way that feels truest to what they're doing. But, it's not to say that one is the old way and this is the new way. It's just, it probably depends on the actual problems you're having.
Exactly. You see a lot of that. There's SRE, there was DevOps, and then SRE came to replace DevOps, and now platform engineering comes to replace SRE. And it's not even close like that, right? So pros bring a lot of stuff to the table, and you need to be aware of what they bring to the table and adapt to your own organization, what makes sense to you. So platform engineering has a lot of value in it, but it also has some drawbacks and it's something that you need to be attentive to, same as SRE, same as DevOps. And it's not one thing or the other, or one replace the other. Of course, in the minds of a lot of people, it's easier just to have like a script. You just do this, and now you are DevOps, or now you are Agile, and it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I love that we're having so many more. I mean, this show is an example, but just in general, a lot more conversations with actual practitioners who can take some of these like very traditional frameworks and things. And like myself included, there's certain incident response frameworks that I'm like, yeah, in theory, like I get it. But at the same time, how many incidents have you been in? Because I'll tell you, it looks very different in practice.
Absolutely. And that was one of the challenges when I joined FanDuel. FanDuel was already a big organization. So one of the things that we needed to do was to find our space, right? So what were the things that we could add value that were either somehow neglected because people just don't have a time, or no one was focusing at all. So it's exactly what you're saying. Yeah, there are frameworks, there are a lot of things that a lot of people do, but just let's take a step back and understand what we need to address here.
Mm-hmm. And just acknowledge the complexity of it all. Like there just isn't a right answer, like silver bullet, just like use Kubernetes and everything is fixed. It's like, I wish.
Yeah, I actually have people look at me funny when I start advocating against using Kubernetes, because I started using Kubernetes way back in the day. There were no managed services. And now when people saying, shouldn't I use Kubernetes? Don't you like Kubernetes? That's not the point, right? The tool is not the point. It's the problem that you're trying to solve. And maybe for your problem, maybe it's too complex, maybe it's not the right tool. Again, going back to the basics and understanding what are trying to solve.
Definitely. I love it. Another thing I wanted to talk about, you do a lot of community work, and there were a couple things I wanted to learn a bit more specifically. So one is the Continuous Delivery Foundation. I've seen that you're a community ambassador there. And I would just love to know more about the foundation, like what your role as a community ambassador entails.
Yeah, so I'm working with the Continuous Delivery Foundation to move forward what continuous delivery, or CI/CD, means. So we do a lot of promotion and events. We also have our own events. We write technical pieces. We do workshops and all that kind of stuff. And so my work is a little bit varied with the foundation. But we're always trying to push the boundaries of what CI/CD really means. So one of the things that I've been doing in the past, and that I really am a little bit passionate about, is the thing where making the distinction between having stuff automated and naturally doing CI/CD, right? So just because you have a build and a deploy automated process doesn't mean that you're doing CI/CD. CI/CD is about culture. It's about the way that you do stuff. You can have a build process automated, a deploy process automated, and then you are working for 3 months on the same thing and code doesn't touch. No, that's the opposite of CI/CD. So it's a lot about that advocacy about what CI/CD really means. I point to Dave Farley a lot to his books, and I know that very far has a strong stance on this, and I kind of agree. And also going back to the same thing that in your reality, maybe it doesn't make sense to actually do the CI/CD as is prescribed, like integrating code every single day and deploying it. But everything points us in the direction that if we do this, it's actually beneficial. And it can be kind of counterintuitive that really I'm deploying every single day, several times a day, integrating code, and my systems are actually more reliable and more stable. Yeah, that's what the data shows us, right? So it's not about feelings. That if we look at the data metrics and we see like the high performers, that's the kind of practice that they do. So a lot of my work is around that.
That's cool. Yeah. And if people are interested in the CD Foundation, is there a way that other people can get involved or follow along?
Yeah, just go to cdfoundation.com. So there's a lot of meetups. We have a meeting every month. We are doing events, so we are now also part of KubeCon. We do media events, so smaller conferences as well. And now there are a lot of meetups. So, and also, for example, DevOps Portal that are organized. We also partnered with the CD Foundation. So inside the CD Foundation website, there's a lot of info about that, and you can see just what's around you, or even online.
Okay, perfect. And I actually, speaking of which, I also did want to ask you about the DevOps Days events, because I know you've been involved as an organizer for those. I'm actually going to my first one as a speaker in September in London. So you should come if you're not already coming to that one. But I've heard that DevOps Days events are kind of like a unique brand of event. And I'm wondering, like, what should people know about DevOps Days if they're curious about it, but maybe they've never been to it? What should people expect?
Yeah, I think you will find at DevOps Days a mixture of a lot of hardcore tech with culture. And I think that what makes DevOps Days unique. So a lot of DevOps Days, and you pretty much in every single DevOps Day that I've been to all around Europe, mostly a few in the US, is that you always have some kind of either core organizer or someone very into the organization. And that's pretty cool, because they will give you the idea, their ideas about DevOps. So I had the opportunity to meet actually some of the founders that did DevOps Days 15 years ago. And you get that feeling that this is not about the tool. This is not about using Jenkins. This is not about doing this. It's about the culture. It's about getting what started with DevOps development and operations team, but it encompasses a lot more. It encompasses quality engineers, it encompasses products, it encompasses security, and you get that blend of getting the understanding of what people mean when they say DevOps, and then learning what it means in practice, like the tools that the companies have used in the past few years. What are the organizations trending toward? So I would say that it's that blend between the culture itself and the tools and practices that the organizations actually employ that make this event unique.
Okay, cool. I am very excited to check one out. The only other question I have for you is just, what is next for you? Do you have events or talks coming up?
Yeah, so I'll be speaking at a few events in Portugal, but I also be at SRE Day in London again. So I'll be speaking there. I have a few events in Portugal, so I also decided, found that I need to help bring more conferences to Portugal, and I'm actually going there to speak as well. And on top of that, I'm thinking about picking up a longer form writing on SRE around the topic of anti-patterns. So just making my experience valuable to other people, saying these are the anti-patterns that probably have failed trap of all of them. So it's not something I'm pointing fingers like, yeah, I did those mistakes. This is what I did. Try to learn something from my mistakes.
Very fair. And I believe you do have a personal website where you post a lot of your blog content and stuff. Is that right? What's the URL so we can plug that for people to check out?
Yeah, it's mccricardo.com.
Perfect. That is all the questions that I have for today. So thank you again so much, Ricardo, for chatting with me. That's all for this episode. We will see you guys next time on Humans or Reliability. Bye for now.